More than 3 million have left the country to seek refuge elsewhere. Most have gone to Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey and Iraq. Another 7 million have been internally displaced by the violence. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says more than 12 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance. Well, the UN is holding a pledging conference for Syria in Kuwait. Valerie Amos is the United Nations Under-Secretary for Humanitarian Affairs and the Emergency Relief Coordinator and joins us live here on the set. Valerie Amos, by anyone's reckoning, these figures are extraordinary, aren't they? 12 million in need of humanitarian assistance because of the war. Just briefly, what's your overall assessment now of this disaster? Because one thing is clear, going into its 5th year, it's getting worse.
It's getting much worse. The numbers are going up rapidly, month by month. When I first went to Syria to persuade the government that there was a humanitarian crisis 4 years ago, we were talking about 1 million people in need. Now it's 12. And actually, the reality is much worse than that on the ground, because if you look at what's happened to essential infrastructure, to healthcare, to roads, to the economy, it means that the majority of Syrians are actually impacted by this crisis. It's a terrible thing.
And apart from that sort of devastation of the infrastructure, and some of the other stories are very worrying. There are reports, for example, that ISIL in Syria has stolen UN-donated aid packages, rebranded it, redistributed it as though it comes from them. If it's true, it's a clever bit of marketing from ISIL, but a big headache for you.
If it's true, it is a terrible thing, but we recognise that there are always risks attached to working in what is essentially a war zone. We have lots of checks and balances in place to make sure that the aid that we deliver gets to the people that need it. We use all kinds of things like photographs of deliveries and make sure that the people who are meant to get the aid report back that they have received it. But there are times when aid will go missing. We saw this in Somalia with Al-Shabaab when tiny amounts of aid went missing. We are very worried that there are reports that this is happening in Syria, and these are currently being investigated.
Let's just talk about the wider problem you have in terms of donors not delivering on their pledges. I mean, according to the Global Humanitarian Assistance website, as of November 2014, a quarter of all funds pledged at the second Kuwait conference hadn't been committed. That's something like $593 million. Now that, I understand, was a significant improvement on March 2014 when 79% of pledges hadn't been committed. How do you put pressure on donors to commit to those promises and pay up?
Well, first of all, I think your figures are a little out of date. So for last year, 90% of what was pledged at the Kuwait conference in January 2014 had not only been pledged but had been committed. So we've received the money. I think it's important to look at time. The pledges are made in January last year. This year the conference is in March. So sometimes it takes donors some time to go back and say this is how we would like the amount we pledged to be divided up. And donors did a very special thing last year, which is the top donors get together on a regular basis and put pressure on each other and those who haven't paid to make sure the money comes.
But that lag in payments still caused a shortfall in funding, which then caused the UN, the World Food Programme, to announce it was starting to cut food aid that it provides to 4.2 million Syrians ravaged by the war. How was that? I mean, how did you manage that? Was the food just cut off, or did you give people less?
Well, two different things. First of all, the Kuwait funding that we receive doesn't cover all the funding that we ask for. It's a contribution. So last year we raised about 55% of what we asked for Syria and neighbouring countries. So the shortfall wasn't because of Kuwait, the shortfall was overall because there was a lack of funding.
Yeah, but whatever the reason, it still affects people on the ground.
And then to come to your point, which is that people are desperate and we're not able to get the help to them. Last year, what the World Food Programme did was they did an appeal to the world and basically said to people, we desperately need your help, and people rallied to that call, and indeed governments did as well.
Just a final thought from you, Valerie Amos. What's the end game here? I mean, it seems that the world's being asked to give more humanitarian aid because of this war. No end in sight just yet. It's sucking in all its neighbours. Many observers say donor fatigue's creeping in. That's a big problem for you. Do you see any hope for any kind of diplomatic or any kind of military end to this thing?
It feels very, very pessimistic right now, but I think we have to have hope for the people of Syria. They're the ones that are suffering this reality every single day. My colleague Staffan de Mistura is doing his best. We are doing our best to get to as many people as we can, and we have to continue to put pressure on the leaders to come to some kind of resolution of this. It's more than 4 years. Without a resolution, without peace, without stability, more people will suffer.
Valerie Amos, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you very much.